In 2025, 5 new attack methods completely destroyed the old security playbook. And if you're someone that is trying to break into cybersecurity right now, this is your golden ticket. You see, while everyone else is still learning outdated techniques from 2020, companies are desperately looking to hire people who understand these brand new threats. And I've been in cybersecurity for over a decade, and I've seen every trend come and go. And what happened in 2025 created one of the biggest opportunities that I've ever witnessed. So today, I'm going to show you the 5 threats that changed everything and why learning just one of these could be your fast track to a 6-figure remote cybersecurity career. And the third threat is so new that 99% of cybersecurity professionals have never even heard of it. So I have on screen right now the 5 threats that reshape web security. Super important area to learn because almost every company has tons of these that need to be secured and tested and things like that. So number one to kick it off, they said, was vibe coding. And vibe coding is something we've talked about quite a lot on this channel. Essentially, if you've been living under a rock for a while, it is where you can start prompting LLMs, things like ChatGPT, Claude. That's the one that's like the front runner, it seems, for programmers and people doing vibe coding is to use like Claude code. You can basically give it prompts and it will generate the code for you, helping you build, whatever you want to build, applications. Since this is in the context of web, you could totally use it for building websites as well, which is a very common application of that. Now, one of the things that we've been seeing, from a lot of articles and a lot of research out there is that this is all the focus on it has been how to create code that will compile correctly, that will run without errors. And they got really good at doing that. In the beginning, it very seldom could produce code that didn't have errors. It would always like error out, and like maybe 25% of the time, it would actually generate code that would actually work. All the focus has been on improving that. Now, from some of the research we last looked at, it was like in the 90s percentile of giving you code that would compile without errors. But now the issue, and from the beginning, the issue that never got fixed was the fact that there is oftentimes security issues in this code. While it does work, it's not the secure way to do it. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of the ones chiefly among that is that developers are not very well educated oftentimes on the security side of things, which leads to a lot of vulnerabilities out there in these forums and the online data that the AI is then trained on. So that's why it's suggesting these insecure ways of doing things. And if we look into some of the data from this infographic here, it says that 97% of developers say that they have at least used AI tools. That's even lower than I would expect. But yeah, there you go. And here's the thing too, not even just developers. How many people that aren't developers, aren't technical people, now they're the ones in the company, they're like, we don't need to hire developers because we can use this AI tool, and they're using it. And like, what are the chances that they're able to pick up on, insecure code and things like that? Almost zero, right? And then 45% of all AI generated code contains exploitable flaws. And here's the big one, 70% of Java code is found to be vulnerable. Java is something, for whatever reason, actually, I do have some theories on this of why it's more vulnerable. I think because there's a lot more legacy code examples out there, because Java is like very legacy at this point. With that said, almost all the Fortune 500 companies are using Java. They love to use their Java. I can tell you that as someone who's worked for many of these companies. I think because there's so much legacy training material on it, there's a lot of insecure code out there on the internet that the AI was then trained on. That's my theory on why it's so high. You can see here some of the ramifications of this, which are pretty far sweeping. Let me just take a pause before we jump into that. If you're looking to level up in cybersecurity and just really streamline the process, how can we leverage this? How can we take advantage of these top 5 threats and really use that to land a job in cybersecurity in 6 months or less? Then definitely check out the link in the description below, fill out a brief survey, and let's hop on a call and let's talk about how we can leverage your background and all this stuff to help you get in the field in this tough times in the job market. But yeah, with that said, like, let's look at what is the actual tangible, because the theory is all good, the numbers and everything, that's one thing, but let's see what's the tangible outcome of all this. What's the tangible damage? Well, there was a production database that was deleted. So despite code freeze instructions, there's this database that had over 1,200 executives and 1,190 firms. So pretty big company, and it was completely wiped by Replic's AI assistant. So that's the danger in using especially some of these MCP servers where you're giving it access to actually take actions, like do like database queries and stuff, is, it could wipe your entire database if you're not careful. So you got to be careful with the vibe coding stuff for sure. Here's another instance, AI dev tools compromised. There's, a number of CVEs here. Anthropic's MCP server, that allowed the exfiltration of data from Claude Code via DNS-based prompt injection. That sounds pretty crazy. I like to look more into that on this channel. That'd be pretty interesting. But that'd be a bit more of an advanced video. And then authentication bypass as well. So US fintech startup used an AI-generated login and circumvented input validation, allowing payload injection. And then there was unsecured code statistics in vibe coding, like we're saying, like we're looking at this earlier here. So that's just one of the five. What are the other four? Well, we have JavaScript injection. Essentially, here they're talking about cross-site scripting. These things have been around for a pretty long time, DOM-based XSS. But now there's also AI-driven prompt injections as well. That's where things get shaken up a little bit, get a little bit interesting. And even React's XSS security was compromised by this stuff. So, this is something that we continue to see. But now with a little bit extra stuff here, we see a coordinated JavaScript injection attack on advertising Chinese gambling services compromise over 150,000 websites in March of last year. And basically, they use like iframes. If you're not familiar with an iframe, you can embed a site on top of the parent site. So you can trick people. This is like a clickjacking old school attack, right? Where you kind of embed another site on top of another one, and people think that it's part of the original site, but you're really interacting with a different external site. So there were things like that that were used here as well, using these overlays, what they call overlays. And you can see the polyfill hack in 2024 as well, kind of like the predecessor to this. And also Chinese businesses exploited a trusted library, which affected over 100,000 websites as well. And they turned it into like repeatable attack method. And so this is something that's not going away in 2026 and beyond. Now, number 3 is MageCart or e-skimming. This one has not gotten as much publicity, but there's been some major brands that were compromised. If you think of traditional skimming, like, skimming an ATM or something where you put your credit card in and there's some overlay on top of that that's stealing your credit card information, it's essentially the e-commerce version of that. So essentially, these e-commerce sites, that's what it exploits, an e-commerce site, it gets compromised and they embed some JavaScript, probably obfuscated heavily, to the point that if you transact on that site, it's skimming your credit card information and sending it to some kind of malicious attacker. So major brands like Ticketmaster, Newegg, British Airways all suffered millions in fines and reputational harm as well. And there were even third-party libraries that were weaponized off of this as well. No surprise, it's been a huge thing. Supply chain attacks, we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But now here's where the AI component comes in. There was AI-powered selectivity. Only high-value transactions were exfiltrated by attackers who profile browsers for luxury purchases. That's pretty interesting. So they were profiling your browser. If you purchase some kind of luxury item, then it would target you because they know, okay, this person has more money. If we got access to their card, maybe have a higher credit limit, maybe it will be like more lucrative for us, maybe fly under the radar. Maybe that person has a lot of credit cards. You might be able to make some small transactions. They don't see it or something. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. The AI powered selectivity. And yeah, this is something definitely to keep an eye on as we go into 2026 as well. And here's something pretty interesting in terms of like the defense of this. They said that CSP, content security policy, gave them false confidence. Attackers just gained access to the whitelisted websites. So yeah, the recommendation is to validate your code based on the behavior rather than the source. So something that you see in the antivirus world, right? In the beginning, there was just static detection. And then we started looking at what is the behavior of the technology. Is it doing something outside of what we'd expect? So now we're looking to see a similar thing on the website of the house where it's like, okay, is your website behaving different than you would expect? And maybe generating some alerts and things based on that. And also, looking at anything that accesses payment data must be continuously monitored. And this is in accordance with PCI DSS, the big compliance standard for if you process credit card information. Supply chain attacks. So this is one that has been huge. I kept seeing it last year come up again and again and again. And spoiler alert, even so far here in 2026, we've seen it a lot as well. So specifically, though, it's AI supply chain attacks. So there's a lot of people like, everyday users messing around with AI models and stuff like that on these open, kind of open source markets and stuff like that. This is something that's been a lucrative attack surface for the hackers. And so they've started uploading their own like malicious models and different things like that to where if a consumer or someone downloaded it, then it could carry out some malicious action. So turning AI essentially into a weapon, the number of malicious Package uploads to open source repositories increased by 156% in 2025. So it basically weaponized it to do things like stealing credentials, usually, or even polymorphic malware, which is something that's gotten a lot of publicity over the last year. So it's malware that can self mutate in order to avoid detection. That I think is another very interesting application of this technology as well. And also context aware, using AI to be context aware and recognize sandboxes. There's traditional methods that you could use before to do that, but now throwing AI into the mix adds a whole nother level of depth to that. The consequence, everyday AI generated variants change, making signature based detection super ineffective at this point on its own, of course. You want to use both to have like the best chance of detection. But yeah, now there's even more out there to just completely destroy static based detection. And yeah, we can see some off the infographic here. Like we read this number off just a second ago. 276 days is the average time to detect an AI supply chain attack. That's pretty crazy. That actually really surprised me. And 87% of organizations globally reported experiencing an AI-driven cyber attack in 2025. So that's also pretty surprising metric as well. So here's some of the tangible attacks. There was a Solana Web3 JS backdoor, and then there were also, this surge here and then this detection window we're talking about. Now, number 5 is web privacy validation. So this is things like if you opt out of something, they found that many companies are still using your data in their advertising, selling it to other advertisers and things like that. So definitely no good, something that they're trying to develop stronger mechanisms around. And there's been some real ramifications for this, like finding the companies. And, there's been HIPAA violations as well, the health privacy in the US, and 70% of cookies are out of compliance. So that was something that was pretty interesting as well. But what is the path forward? So they say we need to move even more so towards assume breach as the default state. We've seen that a lot now in recent years where companies are saying, let's assume that we got hacked and try to secure our environment, assuming the attacker already got in, because there's so many breaches. They want to shift to more of a proactive measure in cybersecurity. Traditionally, it's been reactive, meaning, okay, we got hacked, or there was this breach or potential breach detected. Now let's respond to that. But they want to shift to being more proactive and saying, okay, let's assume we're already compromised. How secure is our internal environment? And I can tell you, as someone that's worked on the inside, oftentimes the internal environment has 100% more security issues than the external. Everyone's focused on the front gate, and then there's gaping walls in the side, and internally, it's, forget about it at that point. So I think this is a smart shift, a smart pivot for companies, but something to be aware of as a job seeker in this field. Also, embracing continuous validation. It's not enough just to be like, okay, we got an audit this year. We got to do our annual PCI audit. So let's make sure we're in compliance. Okay, now we're good until next year. But instead, having these continuous validations, because the environment is ever changing. We're pushing out code faster and changes faster than ever before. And also treating AI as both a tool and a threat. So understanding that AI data is untrusted data, and, leveraging the technology, but at the same time, implementing the correct security controls and really not blindly just trusting it because it came from a machine, right? Here's the reality. These 5 threats aren't just security problems. They're your ticket out of whatever dead-end job you're stuck in right now. Companies are panicking because their current security teams have no idea how to handle AI-generated attacks, supply chain compromises, or these new injection techniques. And they need people who understand this stuff and they're willing to pay 6 figures for it. But here's the thing. You can't figure this out alone. You need someone who has actually been in the trenches, who knows which of these threats companies care about the most, and who can show you exactly how to position yourself as the solution that they so desperately need. So if you're serious about turning this knowledge into a 100K plus remote cybersecurity career, and you don't want to waste the next 2 years plus trying to figure it out just by yourself, then book a call with me down below. The link is in the description, and I'll show you exactly how to leverage these emerging threats into job offers.